Stay tuned. This is your 5 Minutes Real Estate with the Leila Khan Team.
Welcome to 5 Minutes of Real Estate with the Leila Khan Team. I'm your host, Leila Khan, and today we have a very special guest. We have real estate lawyer John Zinati from Zinati K Barristers and Solicitors. John Zinati is a veteran, highly experienced real estate lawyer and partner at Zinati K. He comes with over 28 years of practice experience, and he's done almost 30,000 real estate transactions. I thank you, John, and I welcome you to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Leila.
No problem. And so I'm going to start off with, John, just a very simple question. Why exactly does a client, why would they need a real estate lawyer for a purchase or a sale? Like, walk us through a typical transaction.
Okay, great. I'll start with the basic answer, which is you have to have a lawyer do your real estate deal in Ontario. The main reason for that is that only lawyers can register deeds in the electronic registration system. Some people call sometimes and say, do I really need a lawyer? And I tell them, well, look, maybe if you could even do all this stuff yourself, that would be fine. But in our system, you must have a real estate lawyer to register a deed in the registry office. If there's no registration of a deed, there can be no deal and no transfer of ownership. So by law, you have to have a real estate lawyer. Okay. Now to the nuts and bolts of what we do. It really depends on which side of the transaction you are. Let's say you're buying. The heart of what we do when you're buying a property is, at the end of the day, give you your keys. We're going to arrange to get you the ownership of the property and the keys. Okay. Along the way, in the background, we're checking title. We're dealing with banks. We're making sure everything is okay with the property from a legal perspective before you close. But really what you want from us are your keys when you're buying. When you're selling, what you want from us is your money. And that's our job. We're the ones who are going to send you the money that you get at the end of the day when you sell your property, after we pay your mortgage, any liens, any other commissions, stuff like that on the deal. We give you the check. So that's what you want from your lawyer. When you're buying, it's keys. When you're selling, it's money. Same when you're refinancing. If you're doing a mortgage, our job is to get you that money, pay off your old mortgage and get you the money from the new mortgage. So that's the heart of what we do as lawyers on the transaction.
Excellent. Thank you for that detailed answer. And John, another question that comes up and a lot of clients ask me is, what are the legal expenses associated with the transaction involved? Perhaps you can go through and explain to us what a typical purchase or a sale would cost, and also explain to us a little bit about fixed closing costs.
Okay, so this is a great question, and this is something we've been dealing with now for 28 years almost. So in the past, a lawyer would charge his fee to do the work. Then there would be disbursements. Okay, the disbursements are the out-of-pocket costs, things that we have to pay for in order to do our job properly. We have to order certificates, we have to pull the parcels, we have to get documents retrieved from the system, we might have to order title insurance. All of these are the costs of doing your transaction that the lawyer has to pay for. So the old system was fees and then disbursements. And then of course the big one when we get into costs is land transfer taxes. Those are usually way higher than anything the lawyer will ever charge or could charge. But those are the three components of your closing costs: fees, disbursements, and title insurance, and then your land transfer taxes. What we found was that people didn't like uncertainty with the cost. They wanted to know as close as possible, what is this actually going to cost me? Okay, so what we did is we fixed our costs for a standard transaction, $999 for all fees and internal disbursements. Then you add your title insurance and your they're called Law Society permitted disbursements. These are basically your search costs, and we can't know about those until we dig the search out. Okay, and then your title insurance. So we basically will be able to tell you almost to the dollar what you're going to pay, with only one factor being uncertain, which is what the search is going to cost you. And no lawyer can do that. We know an average search, for example, $175 to $200. We'll be able to tell you that, but can we nail it down? No, because until we get in there and do our job, we can't know what that's going to cost. But otherwise, we fix everything. And we start with a quote that breaks it down to the taxes. So you know, are you a first-time buyer? What are your taxes? Toronto, what are your taxes? So you'll basically have the amount you need to close the deal upfront.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And John, you just mentioned title insurance. I'd just like to delve into that a little bit. If you can explain to our listeners, what is the difference between title insurance and a title search?
Great question. Okay. So you come to the lawyer when you're buying the property to get good title. In the past, the lawyer used to give an opinion on title. He used to tell you, Leila, you just bought this property. In my opinion, your title is good. And that's what you relied on to go forward. And when you went to sell, you say, okay, I had an opinion from my lawyer. He gave me an opinion that the title is good, and therefore I'm selling to you a property with good title. That's the essence of what used to happen. That still happens, but now we have title insurance. What happens with title insurance is that it covers things that the lawyer's opinion can't cover for. So the big one is fraud. A lawyer's opinion never covered for fraud. Why? Because there's no way that I, as a lawyer, can know that a document signed 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago was legitimately signed or not. As a lawyer, I can never certify in my opinion that there's been no fraud. So title insurance comes along and says, look, you lawyer, give us your opinion based on what you see, and we're going to cover the buyer for fraud. The other thing it does is it also goes forward. It covers for fraud into the future. Another thing the lawyer can't cover for. So if you closed your deal today and I told you, hey, everything is great, it could be. Then 1, 2, 3 years down the line, somebody does some funny business on your title. I can't know that. With title insurance, it doesn't matter. They come along and say, if somebody does a fraud on your property after you've owned it, we're going to cover that. Okay? They also come in and take care of things that sometimes we can't get an answer for quickly. So for example, we used to write for a building and zoning certificate to find out if there's any outstanding work orders or notices of violation on the property. Sometimes the closing date happens quicker than we can get the response. So they come in and say, okay, look, don't spend the money on that certificate. You can save that money. If it turns out there is an issue with a building and zoning violation, we cover the buyer. Same with sometimes taxes. We can't get the tax certificate on time. They come along and say, we're going to cover the buyer for unpaid taxes. So what they do is basically supplement the title search for things that are difficult or impossible to check for, and you end up getting the two of them together when you buy your property. You get the lawyer's search done, he does a full title search, reports to the title insurance company tells the buyer, you've got coverage for all this stuff. The other great thing about title insurance that you didn't have with an opinion is that it is valid until you sell the property. The lawyer could be gone. He could be closed. He could have passed away. Anything could have happened. In the past, that meant you're out of luck if there was a problem with what the lawyer did. Now we have these title insurance companies, some of which are easily 100, 120 years old and still in business. They're around so that if something goes wrong when you go to sell, whenever it is, you don't need to knock on the lawyer's door and say, hey, what happened here? You go to the title insurance company, say, look, I have a policy. The new buyer is telling me this is wrong. Can you cover it? So that's the difference between the title search and the title insurance policy. They complement each other, and the title insurance policy adds more to what the lawyer does.
So a very important part of actually the transaction is getting that title insurance in place. And like you said, if the lawyer is no longer in the picture, that they do have, fallback position. So very important information to have. And so John, in your experience, when you have some of these common transactions that you do, what are some of the issues that come up that are sort of like unexpected issues that you have to deal with on closing?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest unexpected issues that we have to deal with are issues with financing. A lot of times, for example, a buyer thinks they have a mortgage, okay, and they come to the time to close their deal, and it turns out that there's a wrinkle, and their mortgage has a condition that hasn't been satisfied. And here we are getting ready to close. We have the buyer's money. We need to turn it over to the seller, and the bank says, oh, sorry, we have a problem here. We need this or this or this satisfied, and it's a surprise. So that's the number one problem on the buy side that we have to deal with. And then we have to jump in, deal with possible extension requests, try to satisfy the bank, and figure out what we can do to get this buyer into the property. It's the converse on the seller side. We're waiting for money. We're saying we're ready to close, and we're expecting the buyer to come and show up with the money so that we can close our deal. But what happens? The buyer's lawyer calls us and says, our buyer's having a problem with financing. Can we have a day? Can we have some more time? And we have to work something out between the buyer and the seller. That is the number one big issue on closing. In terms of stuff that comes up along the way in our title searches, or when we're selling, we find sometimes old undischarged mortgages. We have sellers who pay. This is crazy, but I had a call about 4 or 5 days ago from somebody whose mother-in-law passed away, and she had paid this mortgage off 50 years ago, but the lender did not discharge the mortgage. The lender's gone, the company's gone, and now we have to figure out what to do to get that mortgage off title. Sometimes on the sale side, we find that people haven't changed their title. One owner passes away, but 2 owners remain registered. We have to fix the title before we can sell. Okay, so that can happen on the sale side. On the purchase side, we find liens on the property. We find writs of executions against the seller or somebody with a name like the seller. So we have to clear all that up before we can turn over the money and tell our buyer that you're good, your title is fine. You're not buying any of the seller's title problems. That's our job.
One thing I found, John, and maybe you can comment on this, are utility companies. I know that sometimes when you have rental, like a rental furnace or an air conditioning unit, sometimes these companies, they can really take you, for a ride, in the sense that they can say that they're going to put a lien on your property if you don't pay out the outstanding balance on the time that you're actually selling the property. Can you comment a little bit about that, and maybe also explain to homeowners, it's the pitfalls of possibly dealing with these, companies that do give you rent to own products, for instance?
I think it comes down to an elemental point. Don't sign anything before you read it. Okay? Don't sign anything. So what was happening, Leila, was people would get knocks on the doors, and these companies would come around and they'd get them to sign an agreement to get a new furnace, to get a new air conditioner, or whatever. And in the body of that agreement was the right to register a lien on the property. Okay? So, but the owner didn't know that. They thought they were signing and agreeing to this or that item being installed in the property. So the owner comes to sell the property, and inside on their title, it's registered that they owe X company this much money for this amount. And it's usually pretty exorbitant, I would say, and unfair. Okay. So when we go to close the sale, the buyer says, you have to get this off my title before I buy it. I'm not buying this problem. I'm not buying this lien. You're the one who signed this agreement to buy this unit. I didn't agree to that. You get it off. We write to the company and say, hey, we need this off. And the company says, sure, we'll take it off, but here's the bill. And only if you pay this huge bill will we take this off your title. Okay? And that's where the problem comes. They actually signed and allowed the company to register this instrument. It's called the Notice of Security Interest on title. Okay? So that's where people were getting into trouble, and we would have to pay this money in order to let the sale go through, because at that point, the seller has signed an agreement to sell. And they don't have the time to fight the company anymore, because they're under the gun. Their closing is coming up, and the buyer has the right not to close if you don't get this off, and they're jammed and they have to pay this money. That's the problem with those. Okay. The good thing is the government has basically stepped in and more or less prohibited that practice. It's not going to happen anymore. It could show up still as a debt for you later on, but they can't force it through the title channel to get paid. Okay. That doesn't mean the company can't come after you if you sign it. That's different. But is the registration on title going to hold a closing? That's pretty well done. Okay, so that's the good news. But it still comes down to the buyer, the owner, whomever, read it before you sign it.
Excellent. Yeah, good information to have. And I've run into that situation as well, but very, very good. And I'm glad that the government did step in and make that change.
I've had seniors, believe it or not, one set of seniors, I felt so bad for them. They had to clear 12 instruments off their title. It's as though they kept coming back and back and back, and they had nothing that we could do about it. Yeah.
Awful. And so John, another question I have is for first-time home buyers and sellers, when they're choosing a real estate lawyer, what is it that they should look for in a lawyer?
Okay. It's a great question. So I've been a real estate lawyer now for 27 years. And honestly, it's all I do and it's all I've done. Closing a real estate deal has gotten much more complicated over the years. You need certain software programs. You need to be tuned in with the title insurance companies. You need to understand certain registration procedures. In the past, lawyers would do some family law, do some estates, and they'll handle a little bit of real estate. Okay, that has gotten much, much more difficult because when something goes wrong, you need to be there. You can't say, I'm going to court on a family law matter. I can't close your real estate deal today. No, you have to be there and be ready to close. So my first recommendation is to work with a real estate lawyer, somebody who does almost only that, or the bulk of their practice is that, so that they're set up to deal with problems when they arise and they are available. Okay. The next thing, of course, is experience. You want somebody who is ready to jump in and give the right advice and handle matters properly when a problem arises. If nothing ever goes wrong, great, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for when things do go wrong. And when things do go wrong, you need somebody who's able to jump in quickly, address the problem, especially closing problems. These are very stressful for people. If you're expecting to move into a home and you find out that there's a problem, you might not be able to. You don't want to get nobody on the other end of that line. You need somebody who talks to you, who tells you what can happen, what you can do, where you're right, where you're wrong, what are the solutions, and tries to solve the problem. So with us as real estate lawyers, that's what we're set up to do. And we have at our office, we have 4 lawyers and we have about 6 or 7 clerks. So everybody's only doing this. So I recommend that you deal with firms that have that approach. The other thing, of course, is costs. Okay, you don't want uncertainty with respect to your costs. Get as close as possible to knowing your costs. Okay, and the other thing we pride ourselves on, there are other volume firms which are fine. Some of them, though, will not let you meet a lawyer. They might have you meet their law clerk to close the deal. We don't like that. Law clerks are great. They are the ones who handle the bulk of the transaction, the paperwork, the back and forth, the bank documentation, writing into the instruments, the appropriate information, all of that. That is the job of a law clerk. And we have very experienced ones, and they're great. But at the end of the day, we need our clients to sit with a lawyer, to have an opportunity to go over the documents and ask their questions with a lawyer. So from my perspective, when you're looking around for a lawyer to close your deal, make sure that you will have your meeting for closing with a lawyer, so you're free to ask your questions to them. So that's another thing.
I thank you very, very much wholeheartedly, John. That was a lot of very good information. And I thank you for breaking down the role of what a lawyer's role is in the real estate transaction. It's clear that having a good lawyer on your side makes all the difference in the world, and you definitely want to protect your investment. So this wraps up another episode of 5 Minutes of Real Estate with the Leila Khan Team. Whether you're buying or selling, don't skip this critical step. Consult a trusted real estate lawyer like John Zinati from Zinati K. And I thank you once again, John, for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.